Welcome to the Veterans Impact Show, where our commitment is to help, hope, and healing of our veteran family and our nation. I'm Jim Blythe, a U.S. Navy veteran and a certified senior advisor. Join us as we continue the mission of leadership and commitment to our communities and our great country. Why, you never know where we're going to go or who you're going to meet. We invite you to join in, plug in, and share in what we do. This is your Veterans Impact Show.
Hey, great day and welcome aboard. I've got a great shipmate here, and I tell you what, we're going to be telling a few war stories, but we're going to tell you about something really fantastic, something that you will want to plug into and know more about. But in the meantime, let me tell you, I need to thank the NDBS group that we did last 2-3 weeks ago for a great program that we enjoyed doing and being a part of it. I also want to thank my sponsors, Fairview Independent Mortgage. My NMLS number is 311-548, and the corporate one is 2289. I also want to say we're an equal opportunity lender. I specialize in senior lending, in other words, working with the elderly. Also, I want to thank Symbios, SymbiosCCN.com, medical health provider with the VA, absolutely fantastic part of community care. They do a great job. Look it up if you want to learn how to heal. Finally, Healing Thine Heart's Ministry, Cedric White. He couldn't be with us today. Great friend, great pastor. Go to healingthinehearts.org. Now, we've covered all of that. I want to introduce you, or reintroduce you, to a very good friend, Navy Captain Marc Liebman. Captain Liebman, welcome aboard.
Welcome, Jim. It's an honor to be here. And today we're going to talk about an upcoming National Defense Briefing Series event that is near and dear to my heart, and that's the Great Power Competition, the Sea Power Perspective.
You know, that's what I mentioned when we first came in, to give people a little teaser to that. That was one of the best programs I think I've ever seen. And I think that night, the whole program lasted, 45 minutes longer than normal?
Correct.
People did not want to leave.
Yeah, it was pretty interesting. I was sitting in the back watching people, and normally during our programs, at some points, people will pick up their cell phones, and you can see them doing this, or they're checking their email, whatever they're doing. And in this show, Christina Harwood and Johanna Moore from the Institute for the Study of War had them transfixed, and or the word I like to use is focused. They were glued to what they're saying because they put out some really good information that you don't see or hear in the news media. And it was also, besides being accurate, it's also it gives you much more insight as to what's going on in the world around the United States. So I want to get into how this event's going to play in. So last year we started a series called Great Power Competition. We did air power with General Deptula, who is probably one of the foremost experts on air power. Then we just did the one with Great Power Competition with Christina Harwood and Johanna Moore from the Institute of Study of War, and the title was Great Power Competition: Russia, Asia, China, and the Axis, and Iran, and the Axis of Resistance. And now the next one we're going to do, which will be, I think, number 20 in our series, will be the Great Power Competition, a Sea Power Perspective, and we're going to bring in a retired Rear Admiral by the name of Mike Manazir. He was, besides being a distinguished fighter pilot, squadron commander, he had one of the most interesting billets you could have in the Navy. He was I'll use the current title, Deputy Chief of Naval Operations for Air Warfare, which meant that he was in charge of understanding what the threats were, understanding what strategies need to be developed, and also what equipment we need in the Navy, both naval, air, and surface to some degree, to meet that threat. And so he's going to talk about that. Since retiring from the Navy, he worked for Boeing, and now he's an executive with Hadrian, which is one of the interesting upstarts of producing unmanned aerial vehicles and guided missiles. And so Admiral Manazir is going to be our speaker in October. The date is Sunday, October 26th. It's a Sunday night. The event's going to be live at Heritage Ranch like the others. And if you live in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, I suggest you come. Registration will be open tomorrow. And the seats are limited because we only have can accommodate about 200, 225 people in the at Heritage Ranch, and the registration fee includes a nice dinner, and most importantly, at every one of these events, you from the audience can raise your hand and ask questions. We have 3 different ways to ask questions, but the fact of the matter is, the speakers speak. Adm Manazir will talk for about 30, 35 minutes, and then for about an equal amount of time, unless the questions go on longer, the audience asks questions. We record them all. They get sent to, the recording gets edited to take out bits and pieces, clean up the sound, all those kinds of good things. And then we send it to the speaker or speakers, and they review it, give us a thumbs up, then we post it on our YouTube channel. But if you want to be live, which is what many people like to do, come to Heritage Ranch, register. Again, seats are limited. We take credit cards, and so it's pretty easy to do. And then also you get on our mailing list. And so that's what that's about. And that, like I said, that's the next one. We are planning right now, in fact, tomorrow night at our weekly staff meeting, we're going to talk about future topics, which could be everything from cyber warfare to space and what I call economic warfare. How do sanctions work? Why sanctions? Should we use sanctions? So that kind of stuff.
I think that's fascinating. And the last one, like you said, was not only 100% attended, but it lasted 45 minutes longer because people were asking and learning so much that you can't get in the traditional news media. Now, you guys have a YouTube channel. Are you going to post this last one on YouTube?
Yeah, they're all on YouTube as we speak. Like I said, it's being edited right now. The process is like I said, clean up the sound. Sometimes we shorten it. There's ugly pauses or something like that. We don't edit it in terms of the speakers or whatever they say. It's what they said. Then we send that recording or make the recording available to the speakers so that they can listen to it and make sure we didn't say anything or they didn't say anything that they thought were wrong. We do this because we've had people like the former director of the Special Activities Division of CIA. We've had a former CIA station chief of a Middle Eastern nation. We've had the former chief of naval operations. We've had former SACEUR. We've had lots of very senior people. We've had former Secretary of Defense. So all these people, we give them the courtesy of reviewing what they have said, and then if there's a change, we change it. So far, we haven't had to do that, thank God. But it is, and then plus the fact they then again give us their approval to post it.
So it's not live because Memorex could make a mistake. I think this is really, really great. When you sit down and listen, and I know my beautiful wife likes to watch TV news and not the Communist News Network. Did I say that? I'm sorry. Excuse me.
It used to be the Clinton News Network.
Oh, okay. Basically...
You never heard that before?
No, you're cracking me up. No, I got to tell you, it is information that we as Americans really need to know. One of the big things that a lot of people don't realize is they think of us because of the Air Force and the Army. We are a sea power nation. We're surrounded on basically all sides by navigable oceans, water, even the Great Lakes are navigable. So we are a sea power nation. And one of the things going way back in our history, which you are also a historian, is that we had to intervene, for instance, in Morocco, in Africa.
Yep.
What, the 1803,
1801, 1805.
Yeah.
So let me wax eloquent about that, because the United States is by geography and by trade and by geopolitics a maritime nation. So Jim, you got it absolutely right. In the north, we've got the Great Lakes. East, we have the Atlantic. The south, we have the Gulf of Mexico, also known as the Gulf of America. And on the West Coast, we have the Pacific Ocean. And we're fortunate in the fact that we, North America, are separated from the other continents by thousands of miles of water. But ever since the colonies were founded, and that goes back in the 1600s, we have been dependent on foreign trade. And while in the early parts of the colonial period, we were exporters of raw materials. Starting right after the American Revolution, we began to manufacture stuff. And then as the Industrial Revolution took place, we had the advantage of raw materials, people who were inventive and could invent new technologies, things like screws for ships, the first steam-powered boat, all those kinds of things were invented here. And Eli Whitney is one of the people that's far beyond the cotton gin, had a huge impact on what we know as the Industrial Revolution. But anyway, my point is all that stuff had to get someplace. We couldn't consume it all, so we traded with Europe. And the first time the United States Navy conducted expeditionary warfare as we know it today was against the Barbary pirates, which were, if you look at the North African littoral, it's basically from Algeria over to Libya. So that part of the world, which, by the way, still gives us a pain every so often. But we literally conducted expeditionary ground warfare, sea power, all were done. And that was the first time we did it. And much to the surprise of our mother country, the UK, United Kingdom, we did it successfully. We had allies. We had the Swedes provided 3 frigates. The Kingdom of Sicily provided bases in Sicily and supplies. But we did it. And that was the first time that in this country's history that we used sea power to our own benefit.
And basically, we were knocking out the Barbary pirates.
Yep.
Now, let's go to today's situation. You had the recent situation where we dropped some really heavy-duty bombs in Iran. But the Navy was offshore basically covering those planes coming in.
Yeah, so the Navy's, let me step back from Iran for a second. Traditionally, the Navy has 3 roles. One is deterrence, which means that we put an aircraft carrier or a task force, whatever it is, near a hotspot to say, hey, to the players, don't do something or don't affect U.S. interests or don't affect our allies' interests. We do it all the time. We sometimes call it forward presence, but in fact what it is it's deterrence. And prior to the peace dividend in the 1990s, it was a pretty heavy burden on the United States. It still is a heavy burden, and it's one of the issues that we as a Navy face, which we'll talk about later, about being overcommitted and undermanned and underfunded. But anyway, so that's number one, is deterrence. Okay, and as part of that, we do a whole bunch of other things. We do what's known as SLOC protection, sea lines or sea lanes of communication, which is what a SLOC is. And it's basically a shipping route from point A in the United States or a friendly nation to point B to another friendly nation. So, for example, during World War II, the sea line of communication was between the United States, East Coast of the United States, and England. And the Battle of Atlantic was the longest battle in World War I. It was the most critical battle because had we not won it, Normandy and the land battle in Europe that followed in 1944 would never have happened. So in many parts of the world, there are things called choke points. And so I'll give you a classic choke point. It's the Straits of Hormuz. Lots of oil flows that choke point. It is by definition, by the law of the sea, an international waterway. So every time Iran threatens to close it or affect the shipping, it's an international event, so to speak. And the United States is committed to keeping that SLOC or that choke point open. But there are others. The Straits of Malacca off Singapore. There is the Bandar, I'll never get this right.
Suez Canal.
The Bandar al-Mandab, which is Gulf of Aden, where the Houthis are trying to affect shipping. And they have, in effect, forced shipping companies to, instead of going from down the Suez Canal, down through the Red Sea, and then down into the Gulf of Aden and out into the Indian Ocean, are now going around the coast of Africa. It's more expensive. There's more wear and tear on the ships. Takes a lot longer, costs a lot more. And so the Houthis have affected doing that, and we have been relatively successful in protecting it, but they're still shooting missiles, and therefore the insurance rates go up, and the ship owners decide to go around the Cape of Good Hope. A couple others, there's the Straits of Gibraltar, the Straits of Malacca in Indonesia, the Taiwan Strait, the Korea Strait. These are all choke points that large numbers of commercial vessels go through, and we, in the United States and our allies, are determined to keep them open. And in peacetime, we do what we call freedom of navigation, which means we sail our warships in through those straits and make a big deal out of it. And we making a big deal, I'm talking about we make noise, we fly airplanes, we turn our radars on, we announce our presence. Every time we do that now in the South China Sea, the People's Republic of China objects. It's international waters, too bad, so sad. And then they do things to try to make it ugly for us. But anyway, my point is about that. And then the last traditional mission of the United States Navy is what we call power projection, which is in reality putting Marines on the beach. How we do that, and then sustaining that lodgement until we can turn it over to the Air Force and the Army to continue. For those of you who don't know, during Desert Shield, Desert Storm, which I was a part of, 95% of the munitions came by boat. 95% of the supplies came by boat. How did they get there? They came from Europe, Australia, the United States, through the Mediterranean, down through the Suez Canal, up around the Arabian Peninsula. They came across the Indian Ocean from the West Coast and across the Pacific, but they came by ship. And because it's the only way you can sustain a war. And so this whole idea of power projection, protecting the sea lines of communications, putting Marines ashore when you have to, deterrence, all those things are traditional Navy missions. We, and I know the Air Force hates when I say this, but too bad, so sad. We, the United States Navy and the United States Marine Corps, are the nation's 911 force, primarily because we're forward deployed where the other services don't operate frequently. Yes, the Air Force is in Guam. Yes, the Air Force is in Korea. Yes, the Air Force is in Europe, but they're not. And now they're based in Saudi Arabia and the northern part of the southern part of the Persian Gulf. But the Navy goes places they can't operate, and we do that routinely all the time.
I think it's important that we understand the maritime thing, and what he's talking about really kind of helps us. So the NDBS, the National Defense Briefing Series, talks about all these things in terms of geopolitics, in terms of geomilitary positioning. And it's important for us as Americans to know. And somebody will say, well, why is it important for me? I said, what do you drive? Oh, I drive a Toyota. Well, if Toyota didn't get here by ship, it didn't get here. Now, they have put plants in the United States, but the parts come from there. Everything we touch is also touched by oil, everything. And now transfer of oil throughout the world is huge. So when we come back, we're going to continue this conversation. This is Veterans Impact Show. We're here for you. We'll be right back.
Welcome back, and thanks to our great sponsors, Fairway Independent Mortgage, Healing Thine Hearts Ministry, and Symbios Integrative Health. Now, let's get back to this conversation.
Let's talk about the threats.
Okay. Welcome back. We were in the middle of a conversation. This is a great man, Marc Liebman. Marc, you are a historian. You are an author, published author, 17 books, of which I've got quite a few of them. And you go in and you do depth, and you're part of this National Defense Briefing Series, which has provided tremendous information. You can go to the National Defense Briefing Series. They've got a YouTube presentation that you can do, correct?
We have a YouTube channel where you can see all the past events. You can get to it two ways. One, you can go to our website, www.ndbsinc.org, and just go find past events, click on the event, and they're all titled, they're all there. And then someplace down there you can click on the actual event. So they're all out there.
Before we jump into that, I want to make a point real quick. Marc was talking before about the importance of the United States as a maritime power. I met a wonderful gentleman who was the American ambassador to Paraguay, Ken Good. And Ken talked about how in Paraguay, and you say, what does Paraguay have to do with anything? The entrance into Paraguay is through a river that, quite frankly, all of the agricultural supplies that come out of the breadbasket of South America. And the Chinese have built a base there. And the Chinese have bought tremendous amounts of real estate. Why? The Chinese biggest fear is lack of food. They cannot produce in their own country enough food to sustain them. That's known. Now, they're controlling that food that's coming out of South America. They're in a number of other places as well. And they're setting up, for instance, we talk about Taiwan. Taiwan is correct me if I'm wrong, number one producer in the world of a certain type of chip and technology.
They're the largest producer of semiconductor chips, at least up in the recent past. In fact, the United States, under the first Trump administration, and again now, and I think also Biden continued it, we have started some very, very large fabrication facilities that will enable the United States to be chip independent in a couple of years. So it is that critical.
It is that critical. So if these sea lanes were cut, you could have severe economic repercussions. You could have severe other repercussions in our country. You could really, and that's much of the world, quite frankly.
Yes, the United States is unique in a couple aspects. Theoretically, in fact, not theoretically, we are energy independent if we wanted to be. We can produce all the food that we can eat. In fact, about 7-8 countries in the world can feed the rest of the world. We're one of them: Canada, Argentina, Chile, Australia, New Zealand, and I'm leaving one out. But the fact of the matter is we can produce enough food to feed pretty much the rest of the world. But let me talk about the importance of sea lines of communication. The People's Republic of China imports 90% of its oil via boat from one country, Iran. That oil comes out of Iran. There's 5 ports through the Straits of Hormuz, into the Indian Ocean, across the Indian Ocean, through the Straits of Malacca, and then up through the South China Sea to several large oil ports in southern China, Southern People's Republic of China. Those vessels are very, very easy to interdict, and the Chinese know that. And they know, and we don't have to sink them. We just have to stop them, and it's really easy to stop them on the high seas, particularly if you're either sanctioning the country and or at war with the country, and you just tow them to a place or bring them to a place like Diego Garcia and say, "Have a nice day." And you're going to start to see, I think, and this is one of the things that the people from the Institute for Study of War were talking about when they're talking about sanctions with Russia in this last event, how the United States and the free world is going to start turning the screws on the countries that are buying Russian oil and avoiding sanctions. And again, I use the PRC because it's a wonderful example of how vulnerable a sea line of communication could be to an absolutely critical national resource. And oh, by the way, they're the largest purchaser of coal in the world. And guess who they get most of it from? The United States. And how do they get that coal from the West Coast to China? By boat.
By boat. All right. You had another direction, though, in our conversation that you wanted to take. Mike Manazir, better known, call sign Nasty.
Yeah.
He was a deputy chief of naval operations. Tell us a little bit about Mike. Can we?
Sure.
Because he is going to be the next program in October, and he's been on Veterans Impact Show. He's a good friend, and he's a great man. You didn't mention that he has a tremendous book on leadership.
Yes, he does. Adm Manazir is a best-selling author. He speaks on leadership, and he's one of those people that if you are under his command, you will follow him through the gates of hell willingly and say, "Sir, what hinge do you want me to take off, and how deep do you want me to go?" So Adm Manazir has been a squadron commander. He's been a battle group commander. He's had ships. He commanded Nimitz, so he's been through the nuclear power commanding officer program, which is a 10-year slog when you learn more about nuclear power than you ever want to know. He also has got 3,700 hours and 1,200 traps. Traps are arrested landings on the back end of an aircraft carrier. Trust me, that's a large number. Most people in their naval aviation careers, even if they make it a career, do not get to 1,000. So the fact he's got 1,200 is a big number. Actually, the extra number is 1240. He also flew the F-18, all the current models, A's, B's, C's, D's, and E's, and F's. He's very, very well respected in the naval aviation circles because of what he did and how he did it. And again, N98, N9, which has all of the war fighting in the Navy, and N98, which is the air warfare piece of it. Manazir had both those billets, and that's from where he retired. And he went from there to Boeing, was involved in the F-18E and F and G programs from the manufacturer side, and then he went to his current billet at.
So this is going to be our speaker. Not only, if you come, you're going to get a chance to meet him. I have met some of the most incredible people at this event. And Mark, you said the most important part of this is this. I'm going to disagree with you. Going to the meeting and meeting many of the people that are there. That's where we met Admiral Pat Walsh. That's where we met Admiral Richardson, who was CNO. That's where we've met so many people. And you get to talk to them personally. And they're just like you and me. So we'll be right back with Veterans Impact Show.
Welcome back, and thanks to our great sponsors, Fairway Independent Mortgage, Healing Thine Heart's Ministry, and Symbios Integrative Health. Now, let's get back to this conversation.
Well, welcome back to Jim Blythe with Marc Liebman. Mark wrote a great book about Vietnam and helicopters and all the stuff that was going on. And I called him up and I said, Mark, that's not fiction. I was there on the Oriskany. He goes, that's right. I had to change some of the names.
And the names are changed to protect me and the innocent.
But I will tell you.
And so I have a letter to the Navy saying that this is these two novels, Cherubs 2 and Big Mother 40, are fiction, and that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
So if you want a great read, go look up Marc Liebman. And Cherubs, Big Mother 40 and Cherub 3.
About flying combat SAR special operations in Vietnam.
But also your Age of Sail, everything else. So I had to get that commercial in for you because I enjoy his books and I've enjoyed his friendship. Now, you wanted to talk about the next thing down on the list that you've got. Please.
Yeah, so what I wanted to talk about, because I don't want to steal Admiral Manazir's thunder, but I do want to set the stage for the kinds of things that he's going to talk about. So we're going to ask. So Jim is going to ask, or I'm going to answer some of these questions, but I'm not going to give the entire theory or the entire story away. But two things I do want to talk about. There is a lot of articles written by people in the media, most of whom don't know what they're talking about the fact that the aircraft carrier is dead, will never survive a war with the Chinese. That's bunk. They say, well, they got 1,000-mile hypersonic missiles that can go hypersonic speeds for 1,000 miles. Yeah, that's true. They got lots of them, as a matter of fact. The problem that they face is the same problem the Russians tried to solve for decades, and what every country has ever tried to solve in naval warfare is finding the enemy. And you can go back to the Age of Sail, but in today's event, so I'm in a aircraft carrier or a strike group or battle group 1,000 miles from the Chinese coast. They think that they know that we are. They go through their chain of command. They launch the missile. At 1,000 miles an hour, it's going to take an hour for that missile to get to the vicinity of where they thought the boat was. Okay? In that time, if the aircraft carrier is moving at 30 knots, which it's quite capable is doing if it's under threat, it could be 30 miles from that place. So targeting is number one. Finding the target is number one. And then maintaining a targeting solution that you can get a missile out to that point in space fast enough so that you can do damage. Now we won't get into the defenses that are unable to defend against these kinds of missiles and threats, because that's above and beyond the neck of the woods. The fact of the matter is the aircraft carrier is a moving airfield, and it can change locations. If you're on Guam, if you're on an Air Force base at Anderson, you're a sitting duck, and you're going to get bombarded by missiles. And there's nothing you can do about it because you can't move. You can't move the airfield. You can't move its fuel depots. You can't move. You can disperse them, but you can't move them. And so the mobility of the aircraft carrier to appear off the coast of an adversary is something that kept the war planners in the Kremlin up at night, late at night, every night, because the thing that they feared most, and we proved it time and time again when I was still in the Navy, is we could appear unannounced 200 miles from their vital asset and launch a strike, and they wouldn't know anything until the airplanes they detected them on radar. And we did it. We simulated this many times on exercises, and they devoted billions of rubles to try to find the carrier groups, track them, and then destroy them. And they never could figure out how to do it successfully. The second part of this, and Adm Manazir can go into a lot more detail as to how and why this is still true. So that's the kinds of things you're going to talk about. The other thing is the U.S. Navy has some serious problems. We can't build ships within budget, on schedule, and most of the yards that we used to build ships with have been either sold, or in the case of the Brooklyn Navy Yard, which built several of the Kitty Hawk and Forrestal class carriers and battleships, is now a multi-use development. And one of the finest harbors, New York, harbors in the world. It's gone. And the dry dock is gone. It's big enough to take a nuclear aircraft carrier. There's only about 5 dry docks in the world that can service in a dry dock a nuclear aircraft carrier. So these are all problems that we face as a U.S. Navy, and the Trump administration, to its credit, is starting to address some of them. But the procurement process of buying ships and airplanes is still an issue. We just don't build enough of them. Now, the U.S. Navy trains, at least when I was there, and I have a son who just retired, and we still train to fight outnumbered. But as General Patton said, quantity has a quality all of its own. And there's a limit to what you can do. But if you fight smart, you can deal with it. And then here's the other thing that I want to dive into, and I don't know if Manazir's going to do this or not, but I see videos of the Chinese Navy all the time doing exercises, and the press goes nuts. Oh my God, the Chinese Navies do this. Well, number one, they don't operate at night in terms of aircraft yet. I'm one of those people who would like to sell tickets to all my friends who are naval aviators to go watch their first night traps, but that's another thing. So number one, they don't operate at night. Number two, their exercises are very rigid. We use a term in the Navy, scripted, which means I do this, Jim does that, then I do this, then Jim does that, and there's no deviation. We start that way in most exercises, but they always devolve quicker than some of our fellow services into free play, which means rules. It's just whatever rules of engagement were established to control the tempo are gone, and it's fights on. That and the fact that we still push the decision making down to the lowest possible tactical level. So in the Chinese military and in the Russian military, on which the Chinese military is largely based, they're still trying to drive things out of a central command center. Tactical initiative, God forbid strategic initiative, is frowned upon. It's the fastest way to face a firing squad known to man. So the way we fight is totally different. We give responsibility to young officers and young enlisted people they're just totally incomprehensible to the People's Liberation Army, Navy, and Air Force. We also spend a lot more time, we used to anyway, in the cockpit, and I'm talking about aviation. So when I retired, the typical Navy helicopter pilot in working up would fly about 40 hours a month. We considered that a minimum. When you deployed, it doubled to 80 to 90 hours a month. And then when you came back, you went through a period of stand down, and you began to work back up. But 40 hours a month was a pretty standard number. The tactical community does it based on sortie counts, number of flights you do, because they don't fly. We were flying 4-hour missions. They're flying an hour and a half, hour and 45. So it's a little different. But the fact of the matter is you're flying all the time. We tried, and we still do, use simulators. The simulators do a fairly good job. They're much better than they used to be. But there is no substitute for sitting in the cockpit, being punched off the front end of the deck some dark-ass stormy night, go do your mission, and then come back on that stormy ass night and trap on a board. The fear factor in a simulator just doesn't exist. The tension just doesn't exist. The confidence that you gain from doing it day after day, night after night, is the only thing that separates, that makes us that much better. Because unless you do it day and night all the time, even though it's sort of like riding a bicycle, you got to be good at it, because the maritime environment is far more unforgiving than the overland. Simple example: you punch out of an airplane and you land in a farmer's field. Yeah, you're not going to drown. You may get hurt on landing. Hopefully, you may find somebody, a friendly soul. If not, you can evade. You go punch out over the water, and there's things like sharks that consider you a tasty morsel. You could be 5,000 miles from the nearest piece of land in water 10,000 feet deep, and you're in this little tiny raft. And as a guy who flew combat search and rescue, as well as search and rescue, trying to find a raft in good weather, in daylight, is hard enough. At night, it's several orders of magnitude much more difficult. And the risk in making the rescue is even more, because now you have to put a guy in the water. And then they have to go back and find both of them. And instead of having one survivor, you have two guys. So the whole idea of how you operate and how we operate is different than the Chinese Navy. Yes, they use their ships look like ours. We don't know how well they're going to perform when the crap hits the fan. We simply don't. We can guess. But if we look at how well certain things that they produce perform outside that, if I was a betting man, I'd bet U.S.
Mark, one friend of mine who I'd met at NDBS talked extensively, not just about this training that you're talking about. Matter of fact, a good friend of mine, Admiral Woody Beale, asked me one time in an interview I did with him, he said, "Jim, who runs the Navy?" I said, "The Chief Petty Officers." He said, "That's right. That's the enlisted leadership." But one of the biggest problems, because I was talking to a gentleman who, Air Force general, got to be friends with a Russian Air Force general, and the guy invited him, "Hey, let me take you flying in our latest generation fighter that's tandem seat." And he got out there and he looked at that plane and he didn't want to get in. He did it, but he said you could tell the maintenance was not up to par. And I've heard this from repeated people. They just don't know how to maintain, especially when you start talking about a carrier-based piece of equipment. I think that is huge. Now, we're running short on time. I wish we had a 3-hour program. But one of the things that's critical when you talk about something the Navy needs, the Air Force needs, the latest generation of fighter, I believe it's called the A-47.
Okay, so the Air Force announced procurement of the F-47 this past spring. It's the first sixth-generation fighter. It's going to be built by Boeing. There was a debate within DoD about whether the Defense Industrial Base could produce 2 different airplanes of the 6th generation. The Defense Industrial Base said yes, absolutely. Congress agreed, and so they put into the supplemental budget money for the Navy's version, which is FA-XX, which means fighter attack, and then XX is we don't know what number we're going to give it yet. It's going to be greater than 18, but beyond that, I don't know. But my point is that the Navy needs an airplane like this. The F-35 is a really good airplane. The F-18 and the E&F is a really good airplane, but they're range limited. So in a Pacific fight, and because China seems to be the pacing threat that everyone wants to talk about, you need to be able to go off the front end of the deck, fly 1,000 miles, drop your ordnance, and come back unrefueled. That's a long way to go in a jet. So if you look at the recent strikes with the B-2 strikes in Iran, they were in the air 30 hours. That's not sustainable. You can't, your restrike capability, I don't care how many airplanes you have, and we only have 19 B-2s, is not feasible. So the thing that the carrier battle group gives you, even if it's out 1,000 miles, is restrike capability, and it's some kind of rapid sequencing of events. And then as you wear down the enemy's defenses, you get closer, and then the cycle time decreases. So the FAAX is designed to carry a lot of ordnance a long way. Maneuverability is going to be less of a priority. But I will tell you this, is that at the end in the 1950s, I remember all the stories about the gun is no longer needed in a fighter airplane. Let's see, Su-27 has a gun, MiG-29 has a gun, F-14 has a gun, F-18 has a gun. The Air Force version, I think the Navy version of the F-35 has a gun. Okay, there's a reason for the gun. It's reliable, and rules of engagement are such that you are going to have to still get within visual identification distance of the bad guys. Now, how you do the VID is technology is expanding that, but that's going to happen. So the 6th generation fighter is going to be critical for the Navy's ability to carry the fight to any enemy, not just the PRC.
And so these planes have got to be able to do, say, 2,200 miles to 1,000 out, 100 over target and back. And today, without refueling, it can't be done.
Correct, unless you got a B-52 or a B-2. B-21 will be able to, is like a B-2 ranges, but none of the tactical airplanes, Air Force, Navy, Air Force, I don't care, but the F-15E, the EX are going to be can do that, particularly in a what they call a high density threat or a high threat environment. So the reason this is so critical is, okay, we get the carrier within 500 miles. Well, then you raise up the vulnerability issue or the risk issue. If you say, well, we can tank them, well, then you take out the tanker and the whole strike package gets wet. So it's the ability to go that distance and not have to hang stealth compromising tanks or ordnance on the wings is a critical issue. And this is one of the things that's...
I'm just curious, is part of the design of this new aircraft the capability to deliver hypersonic weapons that could go the extra 1,000 miles, the extra 500 miles? So now you've got a different platform. Yeah, maybe that's a conversation for another day.
Yeah, so that's a great point, Jim. So a lot of the weapons that the Navy's developing and the Air Force have much longer standoff ranges than the weapons from my son's generation, and he retired 2 years ago, and then obviously my generation. Yes, they're longer range. But again, targeting becomes, the farther you get, the more difficult it is to target, the more difficult, and the time late between the time you pull the trigger, weapon comes off the rails, boom, has to fly to the target. So yeah, speed, you can compensate with speed, but the fact of the matter is you don't necessarily want to get close to the target, but you want to carry lots of weapons and then be able to fire them with a high probability of getting the target. This, by the way, is a problem the Russians are facing in Ukraine.
Exactly. Now, I want to interrupt you. One person said to me, aircraft carriers are dodo birds. They're not viable anymore. A submarine's better. And I said, you know what, I hate to tell you this, but there is technology today that they know where every submarine in the world is. They know exactly where they are. And they don't move at the same speeds of a carrier.
Yeah, I don't want to get into the sub versus carrier argument, other than the fact that the U.S. submarines are far superior to anybody else's, except maybe the Brits. But the fact of the matter is, when they sunk, so I spent a year of my life. Wait a second. Go ahead.
I'm going to have to take a break here for just a second. So we're going to continue the conversation talking about submarines versus aircraft carriers with a true expert. I got to tell you, this is Marc Liebman. We're talking about the National Defense Briefing Series, and we're also talking about his books, Marc Liebman, LIEBMAN.com. You need to go there. We'll be right back after these words from all of our partners, Fairway, Symbios, Healing Thine Heart's Ministry. They all support us. You support us. Share the YouTube, share the Facebook, share the program on TV. This is Veterans Impact Show. We're here for you. Welcome back, and thanks to our great sponsors, Fairway Independent Mortgage, Healing Thine Heart's Ministry, and Symbios Integrative Health. Now, let's get back to this conversation. It's a great conversation. I've got to quit interrupting you because you're a captain and I'm not. Hey,
No, I've been interrupted by better people, many better people than me.
okay.
So fire away.
No, you wanted to go into another area to discuss real quickly.
Yeah. So the Navy, after they scrap or has the option of, or decommission, has the option of either taking the ships apart, we call it turning into razor blades, or sinking them for various reasons, mostly to create natural reefs. So they did this with a carrier on which I spent a year and a half of my life on, called the USS America CV-66. And what the Navy did is they decided, okay, we're going to sink this thing as a reef, but we're going to experiment. We're going to close all the watertight hatches, and we're going to blow big holes in it to make it sink.
Did that to the Oriskany too, didn't
Yeah, and guess what? Didn't
they? Didn't
sink.
sink.
They blew bigger holes in it. Didn't sink. So finally, they sent divers on board and started opening some of the watertight compartments, and then ultimately it sank right where it's supposed to be sink. But my point about this is that the nuclear aircraft carriers, as well as the older conventional ones the U.S. Navy had, are really hard targets to sink. You may be able to put one out of action. You may be able to get a mission kill. Sink it, it's going to be really difficult. But again, targeting it, the PRC does not have, or the Russians don't have, has the submarines if he can get within range to kill it. But those submarines probably won't get that far, won't get that close.
Well, Mark, from my experience, and my God, that was a different war, a different century, everything else. So battle tactics, equipment, everything has changed so unbelievably. But when we were at sea, we were told there was 2 submarines, one under us and one somewhere out there distant. There was also several destroyers and a cruiser, and then we were shadowed by a supply ship, usually Sacramento in Vietnam.
Sacramento.
Yeah, you remember that one? And so it was a battle group, and so we were covered below and above. And I asked somebody one time, I said, we're close enough to North Vietnam. Why haven't they sent MiGs out? They said, they have. They just didn't get through.
Yeah, so Little Rock and the cruisers that used to sit off Haiphong took great pleasure in bagging MiGs when they came within range of their surface air missiles. I'll just leave it at that. The carrier battle groups today are much smaller. They're now known as strike groups. They're much smaller in composition. And the one thing that is missing is organic long-range anti-submarine warfare. However, we cover each deploying carrier battle group with a fast attack submarine, and its primary role is to keep other submarines away from the carrier. And they do a pretty good job of it. The only people who know what the sub is doing, and then only a general rule, or is the battle group staff, unless there's something going on, and they're actually. But yeah, there's a submarine out there. The problem is that some waters are not really good submarine hunting waters, which means they're really good for the submarines, or they're shallow, which you can't use large nuclear submarines, where the diesel electrics or the air independent subs are better. But and we don't operate any of those, but a lot of our allies operate really good ones, Japanese. So again, out in the open ocean, I think we can keep the submarines away from the strike group, and I want to say it's not it is a threat. You must honor it, and it's a real threat. But we have ways to deal with it. And again, the Chinese submarine bases, coming back to one of my original points about choke points, are all around Hainan Island, which is in the South China Sea. Which, to get out, you got to go through 1 or 2 major choke points unless you want to go on the surface. Either go out north of the Philippines, or you go out through one of the straits between the Indonesian islands, and that's the only way out. The other channels, you go through international waters. The water is sort of deep, but you don't want to take a nuke boat in there and risk getting trapped, because once they find you in those kinds of waters, you have no place to go. So the Chinese have some real problems, and again, we know it. So geography is in our favor, i.e. they have to get out through choke points.
This has been a tremendous educational experience, I think, for me, but also for you. The National Defense Briefing Series is a tremendous educational experience, not from just an academic standpoint of learning, but the chance to meet with and talk to people like Marc Liebman, people like Pat Walsh, who is frequently there, very good friend of mine. Woody Beale, who's been on my program many times, Admiral Beale. I tell you what, and Mike Manazir has been on my program. Nasty. I don't know how he got that call sign, but he must have been darn good, especially to have that many traps.
You earn your call sign.
You earn your call sign. So what we're telling you about, and we've given you a history lesson, but we've given you a geopolitical lesson from the military standpoint. You need to tune in, jump in, look at it on YouTube, take a look at what the National Defense Briefing Series shows you. It is a tremendous opportunity to educate yourself. And you may say, hey, I'm busy. I live here in Dallas. I'm doing a job. I'm taking care of family. I got to go to soccer practice. Let me tell you something. Everything in your home, everything, in one way or shape or form or another, is touched by sea power. Because almost everything is made out of plastic. Much of the oil comes from overseas. Many of the lithium batteries come from overseas. Many of the things we use come from overseas. Much of the food. We may be self-sufficient in food, but other countries are not. And if they're starving to death, they're going to be dangerous. So we absolutely say to you, join us, come join the National Defense Briefing Series. Look it up. It's the National Defense Briefing Series.org.
Yeah. Not NDBSinc.org.
NDBSinc.org. Thank you. All right. I like to close with a prayer. I like to close this great program. So I want to say, dear God in heaven, King of the universe, thank you so much for being with us. Thank you for helping us to educate. Thank you also, God, for the hedge of protection around our active duty military, whether in the air, sea, or on the land. Thank you for our first responders, and thank you, God, for all of those who run into the fire instead of away from it. Dear God, thank you for the veterans that are helping us bring this nation back together. One nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. This we pray in his holy name. Amen. Mark, thank you for being on board. It is a blast. It always is good.
It's fun.
Get his books, markliebman.com. Liebman.
And they're on Amazon.
Yeah, are all on Amazon. He's an Amazon bestseller. Join us next week.